And now we would like to take the paper that is going to be presented by Dr. Sheikh Mohamed Yousri Ibrahim, who has got a BA and Master's and PhD in Islamic Studies, Sharia Law from Al-Azhar University, where he graduated summa cum laude. He was also awarded the Prince Naif International Prize for Islamic Studies in 2007 for research paper on al-fatwa, أهميتها وضوابطها وآثارها. So fatwa, its significance, binding rules and impacts. Dr. Ibrahim is a member of the board of directors of Mecca-based World Association of Muslim Scholars. He is also a member of the board of trustees and chairman of the scientific committee of Nusra International Organization in Kuwait. And also Dr. Ibrahim is a vice president and member of the board of trustees of the American Open University in Washington and vice dean for scientific research at Al Madina International University in Malaysia, and works as consultant to a number of advocacy and charity institutions. He studied Islamic sciences at the Faculty of Islamic and Arabic Studies at the Open University, Al Madina International University, and other Sharia and academic institutes in Cairo. Dr. Ibrahim is also the author of more than 35 books and has published several scholarly articles in a number of advocacy and cultural magazines and newspapers. He has also made guest appearances in some television programs on satellite channels such as Al-Majd Scientific Channel, featured in programs like Al-Akademiyatu Al-Ilmiya, Science Academy, An-Nas, which is people, and Hikmatu, which is wisdom. So without further ado, and we are all keen and looking forward to listen to His Eminence. The floor is yours, sir. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, may the peace and blessings of God be upon His Prophet and His companions. I would like to talk to you sitting because I am exhausted. So the global system, a critical view to this system. So before we talk about a critical vision of the global system to systems and civilizations today, we have to underline the achievements that have been made by these civilizations, and we have to underline the depth of this civilization.
And indeed, this civilization is innovative and we can be disciples. It is incumbent on us to say that the Muslims do believe that they do live under the umbrella of humanity by and large, and the Western civilization is part and parcel of that. Muslims, or some Muslims, believe that civilizations are not civilizations but only one. But we have different cultures, and Muslims believe that all the creatures are one one nation, encompasses the preachers and the responders. O you who believe, O people, we have created you from a male and female, and we have set you forth as nations so that you would know each other. Indeed, the most generous amongst you is the most pious. So Muslims do believe in the universality of the civilizations. This is just a prelude, and I would like now to perhaps start to give you some snippets of some criticism vis-à-vis this international order succinctly, especially when this lecture is the last, and I'm sure that you must have been bored. There are plenty of failures when it comes to justice because of this order, and people are wondering what is the loophole and how could we plug such loophole. And we would like to answer and say that today is similar to yesterday, and we need to understand the past in order to envisage the future. Those who look at the Western history, the European history as well as the contemporary one, indeed believe, or as a matter of fact, would transpire that there is an exclusion, there is an absolute truth that they cleave to, and as a matter of fact, for every truth, there is an exemption. The Greeks were at loggerheads with the Persians, and the Romans came along, and it became the grandeur empire, and Christianity was peaceful, but Augustine came along and Christianity turned into becoming a warring party. Indeed, in the past, the kingdom of the Lord can only be there militarily, can only be acquired militarily, and that's why the just war term has been floated, and the Western societies, the Western governments deal with this just war as a justification. And as a matter of fact, Protestantism came along and war flared between Catholics and Protestant, a religious war, and it continued for 100 years.
And after that, this creed has been taken by the new immigrants into the new land. And after that, we have seen the Puritans taking with them the most bloody creed in the history of humanity, taking the idea of the chosen people and also taking with them the idea of persecution. That is why we have seen that the people of the American continent has been, total population has been reduced to 10 million after it was 80 million. We have had the First World War and the Second World War, and we have had more than 70 million people who have been dead, and many of them also were wounded. So the West talks about this clash of civilization as it was promoted by Huntington and Fukuyama, and as it was announced by Bernard Lewis that this is a crisis of religions and faiths. So shouldn't the people hold the culture of the West accountable on that basis as a result of not accepting other cultures? Garudi says that the West refuses those who are different. The West condemns those who are different, and these are the reasons that are going to stand behind the collapse of the West and puts humanity in a very great risk. So in the light of recent years and in the light of the recent days, we think that the West is moving towards the Middle Ages when it tries to use the behavior that was used by the courts of the courts of inquisition and all the behaviors that prevailed during that period of time. So we have to separate between what is extremism in the West and extremism in the East. So to find solutions to these aggravated negatives, they start from psychological components before we talk about political or social components. So if we try to find psychological solutions, this is going to lead to commonalities between us as peoples and nations. So to have a global conscience and also to confront the will of power, and also to undermine the other, so transforming humanity into something that is usurped when we have wars of colonial powers. So silence vis-a-vis this kind of partiality is being disloyal to the West itself. So this is trying to cover up the real problems by trying to shed light on superficial problems or problems that do not exist, by shining light on other people's extremism or saying that the others are extremists and a source of harm. So that is why this is misguiding to the whole people. And for us to have just relationships, we have disown extremism, put an end to extremism. So this paper is going to talk about two main points. The first point, so the Western system and the different components of this system, and the second component is to do with these manifestations of harm that humanity has subdued as a result of that. And when we talk about a global system, we do talk about a history that ends with the end of the Second World War, and we are talking about here the West in its expanded sense of the word. So we talk about so many technologies that have taken place as a result of that. We have seen development and different specializations and so on and so forth. And also, this is the era of crises, the era of concerns, the era of so many issues. Yes, there are unprecedented technologies that are happening, but also this world is on the brink of collapse. Joseph Connery, in his book, says that the crisis of modern human beings is very, very deep. So any attempt to analyze this is a challenge to our minds. So this is a crisis whereby we have an imbalance. So people cannot adapt biologically and culturally with the environment. And this is going not to enable us to extend our role to the coming generations. So that is why we have to find solutions to this crisis, to modern man. This is an existence crisis. So any failure to coexist is threatening to humanity. It might lead to a catastrophe that can destroy our humanity. It can lead to animosity between East and West, between North and South. So before we diagnose all these challenges, we have to set the bases and the different traits of this Western civilization and its global system. And this can only be achieved if we understand the historical and social and cultural and religious backgrounds of the West and understand the different components that have led to the establishment of this identity, the identity of this civilization. If we take into account the idea of crisis and the animosity that has emanated from it, we can understand how this has moved into modern world and to the global system, and how the future is going to be in the light of this crisis that is taking place. And in the light of the rise of the right extremism, if the East, if the Orientalists have used their ideas in order to kneel the East to the West, so we have to take into account that studying the West should be a point of liberation and putting an end to dependence and so on and so forth. And without studying these matters deeply, so building relationship with the Western system is not going to be. Without these deep studies, building relations with the West is not going to be possible, taking into account the interests of the East. So this is in order to sustain their hegemony and also to deprive the third world of its rights. And also, this leads to so many catastrophes that homeless people, refugees are suffering from. And we have Jeremy CILE that has authored a book called Dirty Wars. There are hundreds of pages in which he described the different battles that have taken place, the battles that have happened as a result of the West. And also Noam Chomsky also has authored so many books within the same context. So a historical reading of such crises and conflicts and the old roles and modern roles would lead to the fact that the wars, the bloody wars that have taken place was a very distinctive trait of such people, which is unprecedented. And the wars of the Arabs in the pre-Islamic period is only a game compared to what has been carried out by the West. So terrorism, hate, and crises are things that are made by the West. These are the outcome of the West. So this is a kind of a creed that lacks values and ethics. That is why we have to look into the reasons and the culture behind such kind of a behavior. And if we would like to look into the sources of this Western culture, we have to look into the Greek philosophy and Greek civilization, whereby we have seen violence, so beauty has a god and love has a god, and there is a god for war, and so on and so forth. And these gods never agreed as per the Greek mythology. So we have seen crises and conflicts between these gods. And after that, we have seen another kind of civilization through the different drawings and the different stories that have been written that are full of sexual deviances and so on and so forth. Homo's book, Sexuality, underlines such matter very clearly. So this kind of deviation that took place in the past has led to a result that was summarized in a number of statistics and that underline the number of births outside the wedlock as 50% during that period of time. So this is very important indeed when it comes to such a mentality. And also there is the religious dimension to do with Judaism and Christianity, and these are two religions, monotheistic religions, but we have seen that there are so many misunderstandings when it comes to these two religions, and the sons of Israel said that we are the sons of God and the loved ones. We are the chosen people. And after that, we have seen the Protestants also adopting similar ideas. So Wilson, the former American president, the 28th president of the United States of America, adopts a global policy based on exporting the American model to humanity, because he says this is a divine model. So, because of time constraints, I cannot read all my paper, so I would like to talk about the components that have formed this Western mentality, but the objectives of this system and that are aimed to be achieved, such as putting an end to extremism and terrorism. These objectives have failed a great deal. So in truth, this terrorism that the West aimed to put an end to has exacerbated. So terrorism that is looked at as an aggression carried out by a person or a country or a people has become linked to these entities, even if these people are defending themselves or resisting what is happening. Chomsky says that the leadership of the United States of America is extremism in this context, extremist in this context. But the Americans, they want to use violence in order to control the world, and they say this loudly in so many quotes of them and in so many military interventions that have taken place. There are in excess of 30 military interventions that have happened in this century and the century before. And we have seen so many decisions that have taken place by the United Nations and other international organizations. So many violations have been underlined by the United Nations. So the United States of America has violated more than 10 decisions undertaken and resolutions by the United States of America. Oppression and discrimination against laborers and against refugees, a very important topic that should be undertaken here. After the Holocaust and what has happened to the Muslims of different parts of the world, and the President of the United States of America has banned the population of 7 countries from visiting his own country. And when the massacre happened in New Zealand, and if we read what he wrote about this act, he calls those refugees and migrants as invaders. He described them as invaders. So this is very surprising, and it calls to so many thoughts. At the end, I would like to say that what is happening cannot change until wise men in the West revisit what is happening, until they rectify and correct what is happening. Bernard Lewis says that people of the Middle East are not wrong when they say that America is different from Europe. So the United States of America is part of Protestants and Catholics, Western Christianity that represents the history of the West that used to be enemy to the Mamalik of Islam. So in the United States of America is leading the West and cannot say it isn't. It is linked culturally, religiously, and linguistically. I would like to stop here. I do apologize for having taken too long. Thank you so much.
أحمد جزاه الله خيرا وشكر الله تعالى لكم والحمد لله رب العالمين.